The sound of church bells made Penelope Vaughn's stomach turn to ice, even though she was standing 3 miles outside of Taylor, Texas, with dirt under her fingernails and sweat staining the collar of her calico dress. It was August 1878, and the summer heat pressed down on everything like a physical weight. But that was not what made her hands shake as she hung laundry on the line behind her sister's ranch house. The bells meant someone was getting married today, and even after 2 years, the sound still brought back every humiliating detail of the 2 times she had stood at the altar herself, watching the church doors, waiting for grooms who never came. The first time had been in the spring of 1876, when she was 21 years old and still believed in the goodness of men. Thomas Crawford had courted her for 8 months, brought her flowers, told her she was beautiful, made promises about the life they would build together on his family's land. She had sewn her own wedding dress, spent weeks on the delicate stitches, imagined herself walking down the aisle of the small church in Taylor. The day arrived with perfect weather, clear skies, and a gentle breeze that seemed like a blessing. She had waited in the church with her father, listening to the murmurs of the assembled guests growing louder and more uncomfortable with each passing minute. After an hour, her father had gone to Thomas's house and found it empty. Thomas had left town 2 days earlier with a saloon girl named Marie, heading west to California, taking with him not just Penelope's dreams but also $300 he had borrowed from her father. She had thought that was the worst pain she would ever feel, but she had been wrong. The second time had been just over a year ago, in July of 1877. She was 23 then, and Raymond Hodge had seemed different from Thomas in every way. He was older, more established, owned a successful mercantile in town. He had pursued her relentlessly, told her he understood her pain, promised he would never hurt her the way Thomas had. He had been patient with her fears, gentle with her wounded heart. She had been cautious at first, but his steadiness had worn down her defenses. When he proposed, she had said yes, but insisted on a short engagement, wanting to get past the wedding before she could lose her nerve. They set the date for 6 weeks later. She wore the same dress she had sewn for Thomas, unable to afford another. This time she made it all the way to the altar. Raymond was there, standing beside the preacher, looking handsome in his Sunday suit. She walked down the aisle on her father's arm, her heart pounding but hopeful. The preacher began the ceremony. Then, just before the vows, Raymond's face had gone white. He stammered an apology and ran out of the church. Penelope learned later that his former fiancée from back east had arrived in town that morning, and he realized he was still in love with her. They were married within a month. After that, Penelope had left her father's house in Taylor and moved to her older sister Marion's ranch with her husband and 3 children. She could not bear the pitying looks, the whispers, the way conversation stopped when she entered a room. She helped with the children, worked on the ranch, tried to make herself useful and not think about the fact that she was now 25 years old and had been left at the altar twice. In Taylor, she was known as Poor Penelope, the unluckiest woman in Central Texas. Some of the more superstitious folks said she must be cursed. She had just finished hanging the last sheet when she heard the sound of hooves approaching. She shaded her eyes against the brutal sun and saw a rider coming up the long dirt road that led to the ranch. As he got closer, she could make out more details. A tall man on a gray horse, wearing a dark hat and dusty trail clothes. He rode with the easy confidence of someone who spent more time in the saddle than on his feet. Her brother-in-law, James, came out of the barn and walked toward the approaching rider. Penelope stayed by the laundry, but she was close enough to hear their conversation. "Help you with something?" James called out. The rider stopped his horse and tipped his hat. "Name is Emmett Parker." I am looking for work. Heard in town you might need an extra hand with the drive coming up." James studied him for a moment. Penelope found herself studying him too, though she tried not to be obvious about it. Emmett Parker was probably in his late 20s, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at the ends where it brushed his collar. Even from a distance, she could see that he had striking features, all sharp angles and strong lines. There was something solid about him, something steady in the way he sat his horse and met James's appraising gaze without flinching. "You have experience?" James asked. "Been working cattle since I was 12, Emmett said. "Spent the last 5 years on the goodnight-loving trail, bringing herds up from Texas to Colorado. I know my way around a rope and a stubborn steer." "Why are you looking for work here?" "Got tired of the long drives," Emmett said simply. "Want to stay in one place for a while." "Taylor seems like a decent town." James considered this, then nodded. "I could use someone who knows what they are doing. I've got 200 head I need to drive to Austin next month, and I am short-handed. Pay is $30 a month plus room and board. There is a bunkhouse out by the barn. It is not fancy, but it is clean and the roof does not leak." "Sounds fair," Emmett said. He dismounted in one smooth motion and shook James's hand. It was then that his eyes found Penelope standing by the laundry line. Their gazes met for just a moment, but it was long enough for her to notice that his eyes were a deep brown, almost black, and there was an openness in them that made her chest tighten in a way that was both familiar and terrifying. She quickly looked away, grabbed the empty laundry basket, and hurried back toward the house. Over the next few weeks, Penelope tried her best to avoid Emmett Parker. It was not because she disliked him. It was because she found herself noticing him far too much. She noticed the way he always touched his hat when he saw her, the way he was gentle with the horses, the way he played with Marion's children when he thought no one was watching. She noticed that he worked harder than any hand James had ever hired, up before dawn and often working past sunset. She noticed that he had a quiet laugh and kind eyes and never stared at her with pity like so many others did. She noticed all of these things, and it terrified her. One evening in mid-September, when the worst of the summer heat had finally broken and the air held a hint of the fall to come, Penelope was walking back from the chicken coop with a basket of eggs when she nearly collided with Emmett coming around the corner of the barn. "Sorry," they both said at the same time, then stopped awkwardly. Emmett recovered first. "My fault, I was not watching where I was going." "Neither was I," Penelope said. She moved to step around him, but he spoke again. "I have been meaning to introduce myself properly. I am Emmett Parker." He held out his hand. She hesitated, then shifted the egg basket to one arm and took his hand. His grip was firm and warm, and she felt calluses that matched her own. "Penelope Vaughn." "It is nice to meet you, Miss Vaughn. Your sister and brother-in-law have been very kind to me." "They are good people," Penelope said. She pulled her hand back, acutely aware of how rough her own hands were, how plain she must look in her faded work dress with her hair coming loose from its braid. "You live here with them?" Emmett asked. "Yes, I help with the children and the house." She did not elaborate, did not mention why a 25-year-old woman was living with her sister instead of having a home of her own. If Emmett was curious, he did not show it. "Your nieces and nephew are fine kids. Little Samuel has been following me around asking about everything." Kid has more questions than a lawyer. Despite herself, Penelope smiled. "He is at that age where everything is interesting." "It is a good age," Emmett said. There was something wistful in his voice that made her curious, but before she could respond, Marion called from the house that supper was ready. "I should go," Penelope said quickly. "The eggs need to be put away." She hurried toward the house, feeling his eyes on her back and hating how much she wanted to turn around. The cattle drive to Austin was set for the first week of October. James hired 2 more temporary hands to help with the drive, but Emmett would be in charge of the operation. The night before they left, Marion threw a small dinner to see the men off. It was just family and the ranch hands, but Marion insisted on making a proper meal with roast beef and potatoes and a dried apple pie for dessert. Penelope helped serve the food, trying to ignore the fact that Emmett kept looking at her. When she set a plate in front of him, he said softly, "Thank you, Miss Vaughn. It looks delicious." "My sister did most of the cooking," Penelope said. "I just helped." "Well, it is appreciated all the same." After dinner, the men went outside to smoke and talk, while Penelope and Marion cleaned up. Through the kitchen window, Penelope could see Emmett standing slightly apart from the others, looking up at the stars. "He seems like a good man," Marion said, following her sister's gaze. "Who?" Penelope asked, too quickly. Marion gave her a knowing look. "Emmett. He works hard, he is good with the animals, and the children adore him." "I had not noticed," Penelope lied. "Penelope?" Marion dried her hands and turned to face her sister. "I know what you have been through. I know how much those men hurt you, but you cannot let their mistakes steal the rest of your life." "I am not," Penelope said. "I am just being practical. I am not going to make a fool of myself again." "Looking at a handsome man is not making a fool of yourself." "He has not even looked at me that way," Penelope protested. Marion laughed. "Are you blind? The man can barely take his eyes off you. He asks about you constantly. Yesterday he asked James what your favorite flower was." Penelope's heart did a strange little jump. "What did James tell him?" "That you like wild roses. They grow all over the back pasture." "That does not mean anything," Penelope said, but her voice lacked conviction. "It might not," Marion agreed, "but it might mean everything. The question is, are you brave enough to find out?" Penelope did not answer. She was not sure she was brave enough for anything anymore. The men left at dawn the next morning. Penelope told herself she was not going to watch them go, but she found herself at the window anyway, searching for Emmett's figure among the riders. He was easy to spot, tall in the saddle, his dark hat pulled low against the rising sun. Just before the group disappeared over the hill, he turned and looked back at the house. She stepped away from the window quickly, her heart racing like she had run a mile. The men were gone for 2 weeks. During that time, Penelope tried to focus on her work and not think about Emmett Parker. She was not entirely successful. She kept remembering the way he looked at her, the kindness in his eyes, the warmth of his hand when they shook. She remembered Marion saying he had asked about her favorite flower, and she found herself daydreaming like a girl half her age. It was dangerous territory, and she knew it. She had been hurt too badly to trust easily again. But there was something about Emmett that made her want to take the risk, even though it terrified her. When the men returned, they were tired and dusty but successful. The cattle had sold well, and James was in high spirits. That evening, after everyone had bathed and eaten, Emmett knocked on the main house door. Marion answered, and Penelope heard her sister call, "Penelope, someone here to see you." Her stomach flipped. She came to the door and found Emmett standing on the porch, holding something behind his back. He looked nervous, which somehow made him even more appealing. "Evening, Miss Vaughn," he said. "I was wondering if you might take a walk with me. It is a nice night, and I have something I would like to show you." Penelope glanced back at Marion, who was grinning like a cat with cream. "Go on," her sister said. "I will put the children to bed." Penelope grabbed a shawl and stepped outside. The October evening was cool but pleasant, and the sky was beginning to fill with stars. Emmett fell into step beside her as they walked away from the house. The drive went well. Penelope asked, just to break the silence, Very well, no problems to speak of. Your brother-in-law is pleased. He paused, then brought his hand from behind his back. He was holding a small bouquet of wild roses, their pink petals soft in the twilight. I picked these for you. I remembered seeing them growing out by the back pasture. I hope you like them. Penelope took the flowers with shaking hands. No one had given her flowers since Thomas, and even then, they had never felt like this. These were not store-bought or calculated. These were wildflowers that Emmett had taken the time to pick himself, thorns and all. She could see a small scratch on his hand where one must have caught him. "They are beautiful," she said softly. "Thank you." They walked in silence for a while, following the path that led toward the creek. The sound of water moving over rocks grew louder as they approached. Finally, Emmett stopped and turned to face her. "Miss Vaughn, I hope I am not being too forward, but I need to speak plainly. I am not a man who is good with fancy words or games. Since the first day I came to this ranch, I have not been able to stop thinking about you. I know that might sound strange, given that we have barely spoken, but it is the truth. There is something about you that draws me in. Your strength, your kindness, the way you care for your family. I would like to get to know you better if you would allow it." Penelope's throat tightened. She wanted to say yes, wanted to let herself fall into the hope that was blooming in her chest, but fear held her back, cold and familiar. "Emmett, there are things about me you should know. Things that might change how you feel." "Then tell me," he said simply. She took a deep breath and forced herself to meet his eyes. "I have been engaged twice before. Both times I was left at the altar. The first man ran off with another woman. The second one decided he was still in love with someone else right in the middle of our wedding ceremony. I am considered unlucky in Taylor. Some people say I am cursed. If you are seen courting me, people will talk. They will warn you away, and I cannot." Her voice broke slightly. "I cannot go through that again. I cannot stand at another altar and watch another man walk away." She expected him to make excuses, to back away, to suddenly remember something he needed to do. Instead, Emmett stepped closer. "Those men were fools," he said, and there was anger in his voice, but not directed at her. "Any man who would walk away from you is not worthy of being called a man. I do not care what people in town say. I do not believe in curses. I believe in what I can see with my own eyes, and what I see is a woman who has been hurt badly but has not let it make her bitter. A woman who works hard and loves her family and deserves someone who will treat her right." "You do not know me," Penelope whispered. "Then let me get to know you," Emmett said. "I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I am just asking for a chance. Let me court you properly. Let me show you that not all men are like the ones who hurt you." Penelope looked down at the wild roses in her hands. Every instinct told her to protect herself, to say no, to walk away before she could be hurt again. But there was another part of her, smaller but persistent, that whispered about second chances and the possibility of happiness. Emmett had kind eyes, and he had brought her flowers, and he was asking for a chance, not making promises he might not keep. "All right," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, "but we take things slowly." The smile that broke across Emmett's face was like sunrise. "As slow as you need. I am not going anywhere." True to his word, Emmett courted her with patience and care. He came to dinner at the main house several times a week. He took her on walks along the creek. He helped her with her chores without being asked. He was attentive but never pushy, affectionate but always respectful. He made her laugh with stories from his trail driving days. He listened when she talked about her dreams of having a garden and maybe someday a house of her own with a real kitchen. As the weeks passed, Penelope felt herself falling for him despite her best efforts to protect her heart. He was different from Thomas and Raymond in fundamental ways. He was steady where they had been mercurial. He was honest where they had been evasive. When he said he would do something, he did it. When he looked at her, she felt seen in a way she never had before. By November, they were spending almost every evening together. One night, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set, Emmett took her hand. "Penelope, I need you to know something. I am falling in love with you. I have probably been in love with you since the first moment I saw you standing by that laundry line looking fierce and beautiful. I know you need time, and I am willing to give you that, but I want you to know where my heart is." Penelope felt tears prick her eyes. "I am scared," she admitted. "I want to believe this is real, but I am so scared." "Fear is natural after what you have been through," Emmett said. He squeezed her hand gently. "But I promise you I am not going anywhere. I am not going to run. I am not going to change my mind. When I commit to something, I see it through." "How can you be so sure?" she asked. "Because I have never felt like this before," he said simply. "I am 28 years old. I have known plenty of women, but I have never wanted to build a life with any of them until you. You are what I have been searching for without even knowing I was searching." Over the next few weeks, Penelope found herself beginning to trust him. He proved his steadiness over and over in small ways. When he said he would meet her at a certain time, he was always early. When she mentioned in passing that she liked a particular kind of candy from the general store, he brought her some the next day. When she had a bad day and was short-tempered, he was patient and kind. He was everything Thomas and Raymond had not been. In early December, as the weather turned cold and the first hints of winter touched central Texas, Emmett asked her father for permission to marry her. Her father, who had been understandably wary after the first two disasters, questioned Emmett extensively. He wanted to know about his background, his finances, his intentions. Emmett answered every question honestly. He had saved money from his years of trail driving and had enough to buy a small piece of land. He wanted to start his own ranch, nothing big at first, but something he could build on. He wanted Penelope to be his wife and partner in that endeavor. He was willing to wait as long as she needed to feel comfortable. Her father finally gave his blessing, though he warned Emmett that if he hurt Penelope, he would have to answer for it. Emmett accepted this without flinching. That evening, Emmett took Penelope out to the creek again, to the same spot where he had first told her he wanted to court her. The winter air was crisp, and their breath made clouds in the darkness. He took both of her hands in his. "Penelope Vaughn, I love you. I love your strength and your kindness and your courage. I love the way you care for the people around you. I love the way you laugh when you think no one is listening. I love everything about you, and I want to spend the rest of my life showing you how much. Will you marry me?" Penelope felt the old fear rise up, threatening to choke her. This was the moment when things always went wrong. This was when men made promises they did not keep. But as she looked into Emmett's eyes, she saw nothing but love and sincerity. He had proven himself over and over. He had been patient when she needed patience, understanding when she needed understanding. He had never given her a single reason to doubt him. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." Emmett pulled her into his arms and kissed her, and for the first time in years, Penelope felt truly, completely safe. The engagement was announced, and as Emmett had predicted, people in Taylor talked. Some warned him that he was making a mistake. Others told stories about her supposed curse. A few well-meaning friends suggested he was taking on too much trouble. Emmett ignored all of them. When someone mentioned Penelope's past in his hearing, he shut them down quickly and firmly. She was going to be his wife, and he would not tolerate anyone speaking poorly of her. Penelope heard about these encounters through Marion, who heard them from James, who heard them in town. Each time Emmett defended her, her love for him grew stronger. He was not ashamed of her history. He did not see her as damaged or unlucky. He saw her as herself, and that was worth more than anything. They set the wedding date for February 14, 1879, Valentine's Day. It would be a small ceremony, just family and close friends. Penelope did not want anything elaborate. She had learned that big weddings meant more witnesses to potential humiliation. Emmett agreed without argument. He would have married her in a barn at midnight if that was what she wanted. As the wedding date approached, Penelope found her anxiety growing. She trusted Emmett, she truly did, but the fear was so deeply ingrained that she could not quite shake it. What if something went wrong? What if he changed his mind? What if she was doomed to always be left behind? Emmett seemed to sense her increasing nervousness. One evening in late January, he took her out to a small plot of land about 5 miles from James's ranch. "I wanted to show you something," he said. It was a beautiful piece of property, rolling hills and good grass, with a creek running through one corner. In the center, someone had cleared a space and laid the foundation for a house. "I bought this land last month," Emmett said. "I have been working on it when I have free time. The foundation is done, and I have most of the lumber I need to frame up the walls. I wanted to have the house finished before we got married, but I realize now that was the wrong approach." "What do you mean?" Penelope asked. "I mean that this is going to be our house, not just mine. You should have a say in how it is built, so I am asking you to help me finish it. We will build it together, the way we are going to build our life together." Penelope walked around the foundation, imagining walls and rooms, a kitchen where she could cook, a bedroom where they would sleep, maybe someday rooms for children. "You want me to help build the house?" "I want us to be partners in everything," Emmett said. "I do not want to hand you a finished life and expect you to fit into it. I want us to create that life together." It was such a simple statement, but it meant everything. Thomas had made plans without consulting her. Raymond had expected her to simply slide into his established life. Emmett was offering her something entirely different, a true partnership. "I would like that," she said. They spent the next few weeks working on the house together in their spare time. Emmett did the heavy work of framing and roofing, but Penelope helped where she could, holding boards steady, fetching tools, making decisions about where windows should go and how big the kitchen should be. It was hard work, but it was also joyful. They talked as they worked, sharing stories and dreams and plans for the future. Penelope found that the physical labor helped ease her anxiety. Every board they put in place, every nail they hammered, was proof that Emmett was committed to building a life with her. By early February, the basic structure was complete. It was not fancy, just a simple 4-room house with a kitchen, a main room, a bedroom, and a spare room that could be used for guests or eventually a nursery. But it was solid and well built, and Penelope loved every inch of it. The night before the wedding, Penelope could not sleep. She lay in bed at Marion's house, staring at the ceiling, feeling her heart pound. Tomorrow she would put on her wedding dress for the 3rd time. Tomorrow she would walk down the aisle for the 3rd time. The difference was that this time she believed Emmett would be there waiting for her. She believed it with her whole heart, but the fear still whispered its dark possibilities. What if something happened? What if he got sick? What if he had an accident? What if some woman from his past showed up at the last moment? The thought spiraled until she was shaking. Finally, unable to stand it anymore, she got up and dressed. It was after midnight, but she knew she would not sleep unless she did something to quiet her mind. She slipped out of the house and saddled one of the horses. She told herself she was just going for a ride to clear her head, but she knew where she was going. The ride to Emmett's bunkhouse took 20 minutes. When she arrived, she could see lamplight in the window. She dismounted and knocked softly on the door. Emmett answered almost immediately, fully dressed as if he had not been to bed either. When he saw her, concern flooded his face. "Penelope, what is wrong? Are you all right?" "I am sorry," she said, the words tumbling out. "I know it is bad luck to see each other before the wedding, and I know it is the middle of the night, but I could not sleep. I could not stop thinking about tomorrow, and I needed to see you. I needed to know that you are real, and that this is real, and that you are not going to leave." Emmett pulled her inside and wrapped her in his arms. "I am real. This is real, and I am not going to leave. Penelope, listen to me. I know you are scared. I know those other men hurt you badly, but I need you to understand something. Third time is forever with me. Do you hear me? Tomorrow, when you walk down that aisle, I will be standing at the altar waiting for you. I will be there when you arrive, and I will be there when we say our vows, and I will be there for every single day after that for the rest of our lives. There is nothing and no one that could make me walk away from you." "How can you be so certain?" she asked, her face pressed against his chest. "Because I know myself," he said. "I know that when I make a commitment, I keep it. I know that I love you more than I have ever loved anything. I know that building a life with you is all I want. There is no other woman I am pining for. There is no opportunity that could tempt me away. There is just you, and that is more than enough." Penelope pulled back enough to look up at him. "I love you," she said. "I am sorry I am so scared." "You do not need to apologize for being scared," Emmett said. "But you do need to trust me. Can you do that?" She took a deep breath and nodded. "Yes, I trust you." "Good. Now I am going to make us some coffee, and we are going to sit here and talk until you feel better. And then I am going to put you back on that horse and send you home to get at least a few hours of sleep. And tomorrow I am going to marry you, and we are going to start our life together. Does that sound like a plan?" Despite everything, Penelope laughed. "Yes, that sounds like a plan." They sat together for the next 2 hours, drinking coffee and talking about nothing and everything. Emmett told her stories about growing up in East Texas, about learning to rope cattle from his father, about his first trail drive when he was barely old enough to shave. Penelope told him about her childhood, about the time she and Marion had tried to catch a wild Mustang and nearly gotten trampled, about her mother who had died when she was 10, and how much she still missed her. As the sky began to lighten with the approach of dawn, Penelope felt the knot of anxiety in her chest finally begin to loosen. Emmett was solid and real and here. He had not dismissed her fears or told her she was being silly. He had simply been present with her, giving her what she needed, which was his steady, constant presence. "I should go," she said reluctantly. "Marion will worry if she wakes up and I am gone." "I will ride with you," Emmett said. "You do not have to do that, I know, but I want to." They rode back to James and Marion's ranch together in the gray pre-dawn light. When they arrived, Emmett helped her dismount and then took her face in his hands. "I will see you at the church in 8 hours," he said. "I will be the one standing at the altar in my Sunday best, looking like the luckiest man in Texas. Because I am." Penelope stood on her toes and kissed him. "I will be the one in the white dress trying not to cry." "You can cry all you want," Emmett said. "I probably will too." He waited until she was safely inside before riding away. Penelope went back to bed and, surprisingly, fell asleep almost immediately. She woke a few hours later to Marion shaking her shoulder. "Penelope, wake up. It is your wedding day." The morning passed in a blur. Marion helped her bathe and dress. The wedding dress, the same one she had worn twice before, had been cleaned and pressed. Looking at it, Penelope felt a moment of sadness for the girl she had been when she first made it, full of naive hope. But then she thought about the woman she was now, stronger and wiser and about to marry a man who truly loved her. And the sadness faded. Marion styled her hair, pinning it up and leaving a few curls to frame her face. She tucked wild roses, the same kind Emmett had given her on their first walk, into the arrangement. "You look beautiful," Marion said, tears in her eyes. "I am so happy for you." "I am terrified," Penelope admitted. "I know, but Emmett is not like those other men. He is going to be there." "I know he is," Penelope said, and realized she meant it. The fear was still present, but it was smaller now, manageable. Emmett had proven himself over and over. He would not fail her today. The ceremony was set for 2 o'clock at the small church in Taylor. It was the same church where she had been left waiting twice before, and walking into it required every ounce of courage Penelope possessed. Her father was beside her, his arm steady under her hand. The church was filled with a small gathering of people. Marion and James and their children, a few of Emmett's friends from the ranching community, some of Penelope's aunts and uncles. Noticeably absent were some of the townspeople who had gossiped about her. Penelope did not care. The people who mattered were here. She paused at the back of the church, her heart hammering. This was the moment. This was when she would find out if her trust had been misplaced. Then she looked down the aisle and saw Emmett standing at the altar, and everything else fell away. He was there. He was wearing his best suit. His hair was neatly combed, and he was looking at her with such love and intensity that it took her breath away. His eyes were bright, and she could see even from a distance that he was emotional. He mouthed something that looked like, "You are beautiful," and she felt tears start to fall. The preacher nodded, and the small assembly stood. Penelope began to walk down the aisle on her father's arm, her eyes locked on Emmett's. He did not look away. He did not fidget or show any sign of uncertainty. He just watched her come to him with a look of pure joy on his face. When she reached the altar, her father placed her hand in Emmett's. Emmett's fingers closed around hers, warm and sure. "Told you I would be here," he whispered. The preacher began the ceremony. Penelope barely heard the words. She was too focused on Emmett, on the feel of his hand holding hers, on the love shining in his eyes. This was real. This was happening. After everything she had been through, she was finally going to marry a man who loved her truly and completely. When it came time for the vows, Emmett spoke clearly and firmly, his voice carrying through the small church. "I, Emmett Parker, take you, Penelope Vaughn, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you and cherish you, to stand by you in good times and bad, in sickness and health, for as long as we both shall live. I promise that I will never leave you, never hurt you, and never give you cause to doubt my love. You are my heart, and I am yours from this day forward." Penelope's voice shook as she repeated her own vows, but she got through them. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Emmett pulled her into his arms and kissed her as the small congregation applauded. Penelope felt happiness explode through her chest, bright and overwhelming. She had done it. She had walked down the aisle for the 3rd time, and this time she was walking back up it as a married woman. At the small reception at James and Marion's ranch afterward, Emmett never left Penelope's side. He kept her hand in his, as if afraid she might disappear if he let go. People came up to congratulate them, and Emmett introduced Penelope as "my wife" with such pride that it made her want to cry all over again. As the sun began to set, they left the reception and rode together to their new house. Emmett had prepared it for their arrival. There was a fire laid in the fireplace, food in the kitchen, and fresh linens on the bed. It was simple but perfect. "Welcome home, Mrs. Parker," Emmett said as he carried her over the threshold. "It feels like a dream," Penelope said. "It is real," Emmett assured her. "And it is going to keep being real every single day for the rest of our lives." That night, as they lay together in their own bed in their own house, Penelope felt a sense of peace she had never known before. The fear that had haunted her for so long was finally beginning to release its grip. She was married to a man who loved her truly and completely. She had a home of her own. She had a future to build. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Emmett asked, his arm tightening around her. "For not giving up on me, for being patient, for proving that I could trust you." "You do not need to thank me for that," Emmett said. "Loving you is not a hardship. It is the easiest thing I have ever done." The first months of their marriage were everything Penelope had dreamed of and more. They worked together to finish the interior of the house, adding personal touches that made it truly theirs. Emmett built her a kitchen table and chairs. Penelope sewed curtains and made quilts. They planted a vegetable garden that they would tend together come spring. Emmett continued to work for James, but he was also slowly building up his own herd. He bought a few head of cattle here and there, always with an eye toward the future. His plan was to work for James for another year or two while building up his own operation, and then transition to full-time ranching on their own land. Penelope loved being a wife, loved having her own home to care for, loved cooking meals for Emmett and seeing his face light up when he came home each evening. She loved the quiet intimacy of their evenings together, sitting by the fire and talking or reading or just being together. She loved waking up next to him every morning and knowing that he was hers and she was his. In May of 1879, Penelope realized she was pregnant. She was both thrilled and terrified. She had always wanted children, but the prospect of actually bringing a new life into the world was overwhelming. When she told Emmett, he picked her up and spun her around, laughing with joy. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, as if he could not quite believe it. "You are going to be a mother." "You are going to be a father," Penelope said, laughing through happy tears. Emmett was attentive throughout her pregnancy, almost to the point of being overprotective. He did not want her lifting anything heavy or working too hard. Penelope found it both endearing and occasionally frustrating. She was pregnant, not fragile. But she appreciated his concern and let him fuss over her, because she knew it came from love. As her belly grew, they spent their evenings sitting together and planning for the baby's arrival. They converted the spare room into a nursery. Emmett built a cradle with his own hands, sanding it until it was perfectly smooth and safe. Penelope sewed tiny clothes and blankets, marveling at how small everything was. On a cold January night in 1880, 2 days after Penelope's 27th birthday, she went into labor. Emmett rode to fetch the midwife and then paced the main room of their house like a caged animal while the women attended to Penelope in the bedroom. James came to keep him company, bringing a bottle of whiskey. "First baby is always the hardest weight," James said, "but Penelope is strong. She will be fine." Emmett could not sit still. Every time he heard Penelope cry out, he wanted to burst through the door, but the midwife had firmly told him to stay out. "You will just be in the way," she had said. "Let us do our work." After what felt like an eternity but was actually about 8 hours, Emmett heard a new sound, the thin, wavering cry of a newborn baby. He was on his feet instantly. A few minutes later, the midwife opened the door. "You have a son," she said, smiling. "A big, healthy boy. And your wife did wonderfully." Emmett rushed into the room. Penelope was propped up in bed, looking exhausted but radiant, holding a small bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up when he entered, and her smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Emmett approached the bed as if he were walking on sacred ground. He looked down at the tiny face peeking out from the blankets and felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. The baby had a wisp of dark hair and was making small, snuffling noises. His eyes were closed, his fists curled tight. "He is perfect," Emmett breathed. "You are amazing. I cannot believe you did this." "We did this," Penelope corrected gently. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names during the pregnancy but had not settled on anything definite. Now, looking at their son, Emmett said, "What about William, after your father?" Penelope's eyes filled with tears. "My father would love that. William Parker. It is a strong name." "William Parker," Emmett repeated. He reached out and gently touched his son's tiny hand. William's fingers reflexively closed around Emmett's finger, and Emmett felt something break open in his chest. A fierce, protective love unlike anything he had ever experienced. The first years of William's life were busy and full. Emmett worked hard to build up their ranch, and Penelope managed the household and cared for their son. William was a happy baby who grew into a curious, energetic toddler. He adored his father and followed Emmett around whenever he could, his little legs working hard to keep up. By 1882, Emmett's herd had grown large enough that he was able to stop working for James and focus entirely on their own ranch. It was a big step, and there were months when money was tight, but they made it work. Penelope was thrifty and resourceful, and Emmett was a skilled rancher. Slowly but surely, they built something solid. In the fall of 1882, Penelope discovered she was pregnant again. William was 2.5, old enough that another child seemed like a natural next step. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Their daughter was born in May of 1883, a tiny, red-faced infant with Emmett's dark hair and Penelope's blue eyes. "What about Rose?" Emmett suggested, remembering the wild roses he had picked for Penelope all those years ago. "For those flowers I brought you when I was trying to work up the courage to tell you I loved you." "Rose Parker," Penelope said, testing the name. "I love it. Yes, let us call her Rose." William was fascinated by his baby sister. He wanted to hold her and help with her and show her his toys, even though she was far too young to appreciate them. Watching Emmett with their children, seeing how gentle and patient he was, Penelope fell in love with him all over again every single day. Life was not always easy. There were droughts that affected their water supply and their cattle. There were years when the market for beef was poor and they barely scraped by. There were illnesses and injuries and setbacks. But through it all, Emmett and Penelope faced everything together, their partnership growing stronger with each challenge they overcame. The people in Taylor who had once whispered about Penelope's curse eventually had to admit they had been wrong. The marriage not only lasted, it thrived. Emmett and Penelope became known in the community as a solid couple, ranchers who worked hard and treated people fairly. The story of Penelope being left at the altar twice became less of a scandal and more of a testament to her resilience and to Emmett's loyalty. One evening in the summer of 1885, when William was 5 and Rose was 2, Emmett and Penelope were sitting on the porch of their house, watching their children play in the yard. William was showing Rose how to catch fireflies, though she was more interested in chasing them than catching them. "Do you ever think about those early days?" Penelope asked. "When we first met," Emmett slipped his arm around her shoulders. "All the time, I think about how scared you were and how brave you had to be to give me a chance." "I think about how patient you were," Penelope said. "How you never pushed me, never made me feel like I was being foolish for being afraid. You were not foolish. Those men hurt you badly." Emmett kissed the top of her head. "I am just grateful you let me prove I was different." "You know what I realized recently?" Penelope said. "Those 2 men leaving me at the altar, as much as it hurt at the time, was probably the best thing that could have happened to me. If Thomas had married me, I would have been stuck with a man who did not really love me. If Raymond had married me, I would have always wondered if he was thinking about that other woman. But because they left, I was free to meet you. I was free to marry someone who truly loved me. Everything happens for a reason, Emmett agreed. I spent years on cattle drives, going from place to place, never really settling. If I had not gotten tired of it right when I did, I might never have come to Taylor. I might never have seen you standing by that laundry line. We might never have found each other. I am glad we did, Penelope said softly. So am I. Third time was forever with you, just like I promised. They sat together as the sun set, painting the Texas sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. William caught a firefly and brought it to show his mother, cupped carefully in his small hands. Rose toddled over and climbed into her father's lap, tucking her head under his chin. Penelope looked at her family, her home, her life, and felt a contentment so deep it was almost overwhelming. She had been left at the altar twice. She had been called cursed and unlucky. She had been broken and scared and convinced she would never find real love, but she had been wrong. Love had found her in the form of a cowboy with kind eyes and a steady heart, a man who had seen past her pain to the person she truly was, a man who had promised that the third time would be forever, and had kept that promise every single day since. As the years passed, Emmett and Penelope's ranch continued to grow. By 1890, they had built it into one of the most successful operations in the area. They employed several ranch hands and had expanded their herd significantly. The house that they had built together had been added onto multiple times, growing to accommodate their family. In 1887, Penelope gave birth to another daughter, whom they named Clara. In 1889, she had another son, whom they named James after her brother-in-law. Their house was full of laughter and noise and the happy chaos of children. William grew into a responsible young man who loved working with his father. Rose was spirited and independent, always getting into some kind of mischief. Clara was quiet and thoughtful, preferring books to rough play. And little James was still small enough to be everyone's favorite. Penelope had everything she had ever dreamed of and more. She had a husband who adored her, children who brought her joy, a home she loved, and work that gave her purpose. The girl who had stood in church, waiting for a groom, who never came, felt like someone from another lifetime. One afternoon in the spring of 1891, Penelope was in town getting supplies when she saw a familiar face. It took her a moment to place him, and then she realized it was Thomas Crawford, her first fiancé. He had aged poorly, his face lined and weathered, his clothes shabby. He was loading supplies onto a wagon, moving slowly as if in pain. He looked up and saw her at the same moment she recognized him. His eyes widened, and he opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. Penelope could see shame written all over his face. For a moment, she felt all the old hurt and anger rise up. This man had humiliated her, had stolen from her father, had run off and left her to deal with the consequences of his actions. But then she thought about Emmett, waiting for her at home. She thought about her children and her life and how happy she was. And suddenly she felt nothing but pity for Thomas. "Hello, Thomas," she said quietly. "Penelope," he managed. "I mean, Mrs. Parker, I heard you got married." "I did. 12 years ago now. I have 4 children and a ranch west of town." Thomas looked down at his feet. "I want you to know I am sorry for what I did, running out on you like that, taking that money. It was the worst thing I ever did." "What happened to Marie?" Penelope asked, more out of curiosity than any real interest. "She left me in San Antonio, found someone with more money." He laughed bitterly. "I have made a mess of my life, Penelope. I have moved from place to place, never able to make anything stick. I heard you were happy, though. I am glad for that. You deserved better than me." "I got better than you," Penelope said, not unkindly. "I hope you find what you are looking for, Thomas, but I have to go. My husband will be wondering where I am." She walked away without looking back. As she drove the wagon home, she realized that she felt lighter somehow. Seeing Thomas had not brought back the old pain. Instead, it had shown her how far she had come, how much she had grown. That scared, heartbroken girl was gone. In her place was a woman who knew her own worth, who had built a good life through hard work and love. When she got home, Emmett was in the barn fixing a broken gate. She told him about seeing Thomas, and Emmett set down his tools and pulled her into his arms. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Grateful," Penelope said. "Grateful that he left me because it meant I could find you." Emmett kissed her, long and slow. "I love you, Penelope Parker. More today than yesterday, but not as much as tomorrow." It was something he said often, a little ritual between them. Penelope smiled against his lips. "I love you too." The years continued to pass in a blur of work and family and the rhythms of ranch life. William grew up and began courting a nice girl from a neighboring ranch. Rose developed a talent for training horses and started breaking and selling them, bringing in extra income for the family. Clara became the best student in her school and talked about maybe becoming a teacher someday. James followed his father around like a shadow, already showing signs of becoming a skilled cattleman. In 1895, when Penelope was 42 and Emmett was 45, they became grandparents for the first time. William married his sweetheart, and 9 months later, they had a baby girl. Holding her first grandchild, Penelope was overwhelmed with emotion. This tiny person was a continuation of the life and love she and Emmett had built together. She was proof that taking a chance on love, even when you were scared, could lead to blessings beyond measure. One evening that fall, Emmett and Penelope took a walk out to the creek, the same creek where he had first told her he wanted to court her all those years ago. They moved more slowly now than they had in their youth, and Emmett's knee sometimes bothered him from an old injury, but they still made the trip regularly. It was their special place, where so many important moments of their relationship had happened. They sat on a fallen log and watched the water flow past, gold and orange in the late afternoon light. "Do you remember the night before our wedding?" Emmett asked. "When you rode out to the bunkhouse because you were so scared I would not show up?" "How could I forget?" Penelope said. "I was convinced something terrible was going to happen. And I told you that third time was forever with me," Emmett said. "I meant it then and I still mean it now. You are my forever, Penelope. You always have been." Penelope leaned against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the absolute reliability that had been the cornerstone of their marriage. "I am so glad I took a chance on you. I was so scared, but you were worth the risk." "We both were," Emmett said. He turned and cupped her face in his hands, looking into her eyes with the same intensity he had shown the day they married. "Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for building this life with me. Thank you for giving me children and grandchildren and a home. Thank you for being my wife and my partner and my best friend. You have made me happier than I ever dreamed I could be." Tears slipped down Penelope's cheeks. "You saved me, you know. When you came to the ranch that day looking for work, I was so broken. I did not think I would ever be whole again. But you were patient, and you were kind, and you showed me that real love exists. You made me believe in myself again." "You were never broken," Emmett said gently. "You were hurt, but you were never broken. You were always strong and brave and beautiful. I just helped you remember that." They kissed as the sun set behind them. Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built something lasting and true. The girl who had been left at the altar twice was gone, replaced by a woman who knew beyond doubt that she was loved completely and forever. As they walked back to the house hand in hand, Penelope thought about everything they had been through together. The struggles and the triumphs, the hard times and the good times, the children they had raised and the life they had built. She thought about how close she had come to never experiencing any of it, how fear had almost kept her from saying yes to Emmett's courtship. But she had been brave enough to take the chance, and Emmett had been true enough to make it worth the risk. Together, they had created something beautiful and lasting, a love story that had started with heartbreak and fear, but had become something strong and unshakable. Third time had indeed been forever, just as Emmett promised. And Penelope knew with absolute certainty that their forever would last the rest of their lives and beyond. The seasons turned, and life on the ranch continued its steady rhythm. By 1900, as a new century dawned, Emmett and Penelope had been married for 21 years. Their children were grown, or nearly so. William and his wife now had 3 children of their own and were running a successful ranch not far from his parents. Rose had married a horse trainer she met at a cattle auction, and they lived on a small spread where they bred and trained quality horses. Clara had indeed become a teacher and was working at the school in Taylor, beloved by her students. James, now 17, was preparing to take over more of the day-to-day operations of the family ranch. Emmett's hair had gone gray at the temples, and Penelope had lines around her eyes from years of squinting in the Texas sun, but they were still as devoted to each other as they had been on their wedding day. If anything, their love had deepened with time, growing roots that went down to bedrock. One afternoon in early spring, the whole family gathered at Emmett and Penelope's ranch for Sunday dinner. It had become a tradition over the years, all of them coming together to share a meal and catch up on each other's lives. The house was full of noise and laughter, with grandchildren running around and the adults trying to have conversations over the chaos. After the meal, as Penelope was cleaning up in the kitchen with her daughters and daughters-in-law, Rose said, "Mama, I have been meaning to ask you something. My husband and I were talking the other night about how you and Papa met. I realized I do not know the whole story. I know Papa came to work for Uncle James and that is how you met, but how did you end up together? What made you fall in love?" Penelope paused in her dishwashing, considering the question. Her daughters and daughters-in-law had stopped their work too, waiting for her answer. She had never told them the full story of her past, about being left at the altar twice. It had seemed like ancient history, something that did not matter anymore. But looking at their expectant faces, she realized that maybe it did matter, not because of the pain, but because of what came after. "Sit down," she said. "This is a longer story than you might think." They all settled around the kitchen table, and Penelope told them everything. She told them about Thomas and Raymond, about the humiliation and heartbreak of being left twice. She told them about moving to Marion's ranch and thinking her life was over. She told them about the day Emmett rode up looking for work, and how scared she had been to let herself feel anything for him. She told them about his patience and kindness, about the wild roses and the house they built together, about the night before the wedding when she had ridden out in the middle of the night because she was so afraid he would not show up. "But he did show up," Rose said, her eyes bright with tears. "He did," Penelope confirmed, "and he told me that third time was forever with him, and he was right. It has been forever and it still is." Clara wiped her eyes. "I had no idea you went through all that, Mama. You must have been so brave to give Papa a chance after being hurt so badly." "I was terrified," Penelope admitted, "but I am so glad I did it. Your father is the best thing that ever happened to me. Those other men leaving me was a blessing in disguise because it meant I was free to meet your father and build this life with him." William's wife, Sarah, reached across the table and squeezed Penelope's hand. "Thank you for telling us. It makes me love your story even more, knowing what you overcame to be together." Later that evening, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet again, Penelope and Emmett sat on the porch together, watching the stars come out. "I told the girls about my past today," Penelope said. "About Thomas and Raymond and being left at the altar. How did that come about?" Emmett asked. Rose asked how we fell in love. I realized I had never told them the whole story. Penelope took his hand. "I wanted them to know that sometimes the best things in life come after the worst things, that it is worth taking a risk on love even when you are scared." Emmett brought her hand to his lips and kissed it. "You are a wise woman, Penelope Parker." "I had a good teacher," she said, leaning her head on his shoulder. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the ranch. Cattle lowing in the distance, the chirp of crickets, the soft rustle of wind through the grass. It was a peaceful, contented sound, the sound of a life well lived. "You have any regrets?" Penelope asked suddenly. Emmett was quiet for a moment, considering. "None," he finally said. "Not a single one. Every choice I made led me here to this life. How could I regret any of it?" "I feel the same way," Penelope said. "Even the painful parts, because they made me appreciate what we have even more." As the years continued to pass, Emmett and Penelope grew older together, their love a constant through all the changes that life brought. They watched their grandchildren grow and welcomed great-grandchildren. They saw Taylor transform from a rough frontier town into a more settled community. They weathered storms and droughts and economic downturns. They celebrated triumphs and mourned losses. Through it all, they remained each other's anchor, each other's home. In the summer of 1908, when Penelope was 55 and Emmett was 58, they celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary. Their children threw them a party at the ranch, inviting friends and neighbors from all over the county. It was a joyous occasion, with music and dancing and more food than anyone could possibly eat. As Penelope watched Emmett dance with their granddaughter, his eyes bright with laughter, she was struck by how lucky she was. She had been given a second chance at love, a third chance at happiness, and she had not wasted it. She had built a beautiful life with a man who had proven, over and over again, that he was worthy of her trust. That night, after everyone had gone home, Emmett and Penelope sat on their porch one more time, watching the summer stars. 30 years, Emmett mused. Seems like a lifetime and like yesterday all at once. "The best 30 years of my life," Penelope said. "Thank you for every one of them." "Thank you for saying yes," Emmett replied. "Thank you for being brave enough to give me a chance when you had every reason not to. Thank you for building this life with me." "Third time was forever," Penelope said softly, echoing the words he had said to her so long ago. "Third time is forever," Emmett corrected gently. "It is not past tense, it is still happening. Every day I choose you. Every day I commit to you all over again. That is what forever means." Penelope felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were happy tears. She had been so broken when Emmett first came into her life, so convinced that she would never be happy again. But he had shown her that healing was possible, that love could be trusted, that happily ever after was not just a fairy tale. They continued to sit together as the night deepened. Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built something strong and lasting and true. The girl who had been left at the altar twice had become a woman who knew, beyond any shadow of doubt, that she was loved completely and forever. And that made all the difference. As they finally rose to go inside, Emmett took Penelope's hand and said, "You know, I meant what I said all those years ago. Third time is forever with me, and I intend to keep that promise for as long as I have breath in my body." "I know you do," Penelope said, "and that is why I love you." They walked into their house together, hand in hand, ready for whatever the future might bring, secure in the knowledge that they would face it together, just as they always had. The third time had indeed been forever, and their forever was a beautiful thing, built on trust and patience, and a love that had stood the test of time. The cowboy who said third time was forever with him had proven himself true, and the woman who had been brave enough to believe him had been rewarded with a life beyond her wildest dreams. Together, they had created not just a marriage, but a legacy of love that would endure for generations to come.